Hi, Internet. Welcome to another episode of Exclusively Admirers. I'm your host, Bethany, and I talk to people that I admire about people, places, and things that they admire. In this episode of Exclusively Admirers, I had the opportunity to sit down with Alain Mesa. You may be familiar with Alain's work as Chad in the anime Bleach as the Blue Keeper, in Go-Go Loser Ranger, and as Alejandro Vargas in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. In this episode, Alain and I talk about admiration and his influences, creativity, his career, and he shares valuable insights and advice on navigating the complexities of being a creative. When I asked Alain what charities he supports, he mentioned three that were near and dear to his heart: the ASPCA, St. Jude's Children's Hospital, and the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. If you're interested in learning more about any of those charities and possibly supporting them, please follow the links in the description. And now please enjoy this conversation with Alain Mesa. Alain, thank you so much for joining me on my little podcast today. I really appreciate your time. I have lots of questions for you, so let's go ahead and get into it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and I'm excited to be here. And I'm excited to get into this conversation for sure and share some knowledge, get some knowledge. So, yeah, ready to dive into it.
All right, let's do it. So tell me about someone that you admire and tell me why.
So, I like to think that I admire so many people, and I think it's important to have certain heroes for certain things. So, I have heroes professionally, I have spiritual heroes, I have heroes of the community. Um, Obviously my dad's a big hero of mine. He was an incredible male figure growing up, and he taught me a lot about life and continues to teach me a lot about life. And about how I want to be a father someday and how I want to, give off my little bits of wisdom to a miniature version of me. So I think that he definitely has had the most influence on me and is the best role model for sure.
Awesome. So you mentioned having kind of a diverse mixture of heroes. Are there any other, heroes that you'd like to talk about, like community heroes, spiritual heroes? Anybody that you want to elaborate on a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, in the world, I'm always looking at actors, and I'm always looking to see, what traits of certain actors I want, not just about their art and about what they're creating, but about how they conduct themselves on stage, how they conduct themselves professionally. And every time that I see somebody, I'm just like, man, who does something that stands out to me. I kind of keep that in my little Rolodex, and I'm like, that's the type of actor who I want to be. I think Dwayne Johnson is a perfect example. The Rock. He's such a benevolent person. He gives people the time of day. And in the end, if at the root of who you are, regardless of your career, if you really want to help people, and if you want to do that one person at a time, then it doesn't matter what you're doing for a living. And if you do have some sort of public, you know, name, or if you have 3 followers and one of those followers says, hey, like, give me some advice, if you have the advice, then give it. Or if you even if it's just to say, hey, like, I'm there too. So I think that he does that a lot. I think that he kind of tries to shed his light on other people as much as he can. And I think he's a great role model for me. And also, personally, my first time on a film set was back when I was in college, when I was still living at home in Miami, and it was in the film Miami Vice. And it was starred Jamie Foxx and Colin Farrell, and the movie was, it was okay. But I do remember, being on set a bunch of days, and I do remember I was like an extra and a stand-in, and I remember that Colin Farrell's assistant at the time was somebody who was a mutual friend of my brother and I. And I was like, man, introduce me to Colin Farrell. And Colin Farrell, eventually he did, and he, pulled me, at a cigarette, he pulled me aside, but for those 3 or 4 minutes that he was talking to me, he really, really gave me his time. And there was nobody else on set except me. And and he gave me advice, and he gave me his energy. He gave me his time of day. And furthermore, one of the scenes, I know I'm talking a lot about this, but one of the scenes
No,
that we
it's okay.
did or that they did was in a trailer park, and it was unfortunately, it was, the neighborhood was very bad, and the kids there were, very poor, but they would all kind of were so eager and interested to see, what was going on. And Colin Farrell would go, in between takes, all the way over to where they were peeking through their fence at like 2 in the morning, and sign autographs and take pictures and talk to them. And it just, that made an impact. I'm like, man, I want to be that guy on set. That's a leader.
Was there like a specific moment when you realized that this person had kind of that huge impact on you?
Um, well, with Colin Farrell, I think it was because I had never seen an actor, a movie star like that up close, and he was a big star at the time. He still is. And so for him to, really just give me the time of day, at a time that I was going to school for acting, in college, and knowing that I wanted to go to LA, and knowing, and asking him for advice, and him giving him, his bit of advice, that definitely made an impact. And I think that it really showed up when I was asking those questions about myself, like, how do I want to conduct myself on set? And it's tough when you don't have the opportunities, but then when you have the opportunity, you better have asked yourself that question before, so that, like, hey, this is the standard that I want to set for myself, and as I've always said I was going to do. I think that when I started to ask myself those questions, when I started to get that, and that's also maybe The Rock for me, because I was a fan of The Rock as a kid. When I was in middle school, I used to wear this wrestling shirt. But when I started to ask myself, how can I become a better human being through what talent I've been given, and then whatever talent I'm working on, then that's when, I started to notice The Rock, and I was like, man, this is what I want to be like. This guy's so benevolent. I don't know why I didn't see it before. And maybe he also didn't have the form that he has now. He, maybe years ago he was trying to he was up and coming. Now he's doing a lot more family films, and he's in a position with his, power in the industry, and financially, to help others. You know, like, Jack Black's another. He's like that too. I love Jack Black. I've always been a fan of Tenacious D. And lately I've been seeing just all the benevolent stuff that he's doing. He's meeting people. He's, even just people who stop him on the street, and you think, man, this guy's not going to give me the time of day. Well, they have video of him joking around and being animated, and that fills people up, because they're always going to walk away with that story. Just like I always walk away with that story of Colin Farrell, until I, maybe meet him on set and be like, man, this is how much of an impact you actually had.
Can you talk a little bit about how one of these folks that you really admire has influenced your own creativity in some way?
Yeah. Well, I can talk about another hero of mine if you'd like.
Sure. Yeah. Go
Okay,
for it.
because in the world of creativity, there's a lot of actors, and I mean, there's so many heroes of mine. But I think going back to how to conduct yourself on set and how to be a great leader, somebody like Daniel Day-Lewis, who is an incredible actor, and he is, somebody who people fear his process, because they think, oh my goodness, he's going to be so method, and he's going to be in character, and he's going to be scary. But it's actually, I think it's far from that. I think that there's definitely an obsessive level about it, but I think that he is so professional on set, and he's so kind, and he cares so much for his other family of people working with him, his other actors involved, and everybody else involved in the story, that I think that he, um yeah, I think that he just sets a really great example, and sets the tone very well on set for, hey, this is how we're supposed to be. This is something important. This guy isn't just playing pretend. This guy is really taking it to the next level, and uplifting the other actors. And I've read stories about being on, when Steven Spielberg's like, damn, I gotta be on my A game here. When he's making Lincoln or something, or Scorsese, they're like, wow. Well, that says that means one actor can do that, and that means I think that anybody can do that for whatever craft or skill that they want to do that for. They can really push themselves as much as they can, and get things done. And we surprise ourselves all the time. So when I was working on COD, I was like, man, I really got to be as professional, and I want to be as driven as I can, and give myself to the work. And I think that that's what he does. So creatively, anybody that really just gives themselves up to the work, so actors like Daniel Day-Lewis and Joaquin Phoenix, Bryan Cranston, Heisenberg, man, and he's somebody who creatively, he does it all. He does voiceover, he does video games, he does television, he does movies, he's done stage. I saw him on stage here in LA, and it was the best piece of live theater I've ever seen. So that's who inspires me, and the people who I look up to creatively. These are thought-provoking questions, may I say.
Yeah, I mean, I have like an established list of questions, but it's really nice when the conversation just kind of goes like a different direction. And, I don't ask every question every episode. It's just kind of like the framework to kind of lay the ground for like a really good thought-provoking conversation, and also hopefully give you a chance to talk about things that you don't always get a chance to talk about.
That's what I'm
So
saying. Yeah, that's why I love talking about this.
awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. So you did touch on this a little bit about, meeting Colin Farrell, and I'm not sure if you've met the other folks that you said that you really admire. But for example, if we kind of go back to like the Colin Farrell example, if you met him, was there anything that you wish that you had said, or was there anything that you wish that you would have asked him that like you didn't get a chance to ask him, that if you could go back, like, oh yeah, here's, what I should have said, or I wish I would have like an opportunity to ask The Rock this specific question? Or
Yeah. Well, in the case of Colin Farrell, um, that's a good question. In the case of Colin Farrell, the thing is that I asked, I didn't know any better, so I immediately was asking him advice about how to move out to LA. What do I do? I'm an actor. I'm in college. Help! You're Colin Farrell. You're a movie star. Help me! Help me! Help me! I'm a kid. And he did. He gave me the advice. He said, take your time here. He said, don't rush to Los Angeles. And just do what you got to do out here. Finish school and take care of it. And when you're ready, you'll go out there and you'll know. And that's really all he did. That's the only advice he gave me, was kind of leading me up to Los Angeles. And the rest, he's like, hey, you got to take care of. But I don't think I probably would have wanted him to, because I don't quite remember what the conversation was, but I do remember we were kind of shooting the shit for 2 minutes, and he was telling me about going to McDonald's, and just talking about like, yeah, it's the set, and it's a long day, and it was a Michael Mann movie, so there was a lot of, like, I don't remember what it was about, but I remember the feeling, so sometimes you don't remember what somebody says or exactly the details, but you remember the feeling you had, and I felt inspired. It made me want to be an actor more, and I'm glad that happened. And it's funny because, you know, Jamie Foxx was also on set. But he, was kind of just going to his from his set, and he wasn't as around as Colin Farrell was, and he had just won an Academy Award. So you would think that, yeah, I was on set just with Jamie Foxx, and this guy had won an Oscar, and that would be the story that I'm telling, but it's not. It's Colin Farrell, and it's him, how he gave time to me and to these kids. And you never know who's watching, and you never know who they'll be 10, 15, 20 years from now, if they can help you out in some way, and because we're all kind of related in some way. So you never know who's watching. That's why it's always great to just kind of be your best self and share love.
Has your own sense of admiration for these particular actors and their craft and maybe the industry itself, has how has that evolved over time and kind of influenced your own creativity and kind of how you see your own industry and your own interests?
Great question. Um, I can speak more for voiceover and for video games and for the people who are working, all the time doing that, just because I have more experience with that. I'd love to say that yes, I see these actors, and I kind of do see and being here in Los Angeles, these actors, somebody like a Daniel Day-Lewis or a Bryan Cranston, I mean, I'm awed by their art. But at the same time, I'm a professional, so I know very well how to be like, hey, wait a minute, we're colleagues now, and we're doing some sort of art, and I think that you have to do that as well. But it's been interesting in the world of voiceover because we spoke about this a little bit beforehand, off camera, but the whole world of cons and getting into that, and I would just always think like, man, who are these people that people just line up to sign these people's autograph, and but it's a big community. It's a huge fan base that go to these things, and then you start to see, oh, these are the actors, and then you start to get involved. You do a game like COD, and then you're like, well, wait a minute, now they want you to get a booth. So then looking at these people, it's been pretty interesting that there has been a shift. Even like Troy Baker, Troy Baker's everybody's like, he's like the Christian Bale of video games. The guy's always doing stuff, but it's I saw him, I saw him at the BAFTAs, and just the fact that I was there for a game that I was nominated for, and then he was there, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, now you don't seem like, you're Joel anymore. You don't seem like you're just that far removed. And then when you get auditions for games that you don't get, but that you realize, wait, he was in, you're like, wait a minute, now our worlds are kind of crossing in some way, and I think that that's been great, and I can't wait to see where the next level is and where the next pool of people that I'm kind of rubbing shoulders with, and how, you know, and how hopefully they'll like my work too. you know?
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will.
Yeah, thanks.
Goes without saying. So, do you think that the qualities you admire in all of these other people reflect characteristics within yourself, either that already exist or things that you're really looking to develop?
Yeah, excellent questions. Yes. I think a little bit of both. I think that like, I'm always somebody, I think it depends on the person that you are. So I'm somebody who I'm self-aware. I'm always trying to be better. There was a long time that I wasn't like that, and I was just kind of content being whatever I was and whatever life would take me. And I was, probably an asshole. And when I was in high school, and so when I became self-aware, and I'm like, wait a minute, like we're supposed to become better people. We're supposed to be here for each other and helping others. That's when I started to kind of make the shift. um, yeah, what was the question again?
The characteristics that you admire in other people, and how is
So
that influencing your own personality characteristics and things that you want to develop in yourself?
when I started to make the shift, I started to notice those traits in others. So a trait most of the time that I'm like, yeah, like I want to be like this person. I want to be like that. I want to be like The Rock. I want to be, that type of humanitarian. I want to, be like Bryan Cranston, and he does all these different traits that I see in people. And then I think that that's important because nobody's perfect, and Cranston's not perfect, and The Rock's not perfect. Everybody has their faults, but I think that it's a good blueprint to have, or to Frankenstein yourself what you believe to be the best person. And it has nothing to do with how you look or how you sound. It has to do with what you do for others most of the time and how you feel about yourself, and that's at the bottom line. And the older I get and the wiser I get, the more I understand that, and it's just so freeing. It's so beautiful, and it makes me want to connect with people way more. So it's awesome, so I'm constantly looking for that in other people. And if I see something that I'm working on myself or that I've worked on and have gotten better, and I see that in somebody else, I'll try and point it out, because I'm like, that's something that I don't know if you have, but it's an admirable trait. So I'll point it out, and say, you're good, you're cool in some way, you're good, you're doing something right, well done, well, job well done. So
So it sounds like you're a big fan of kind of helping build people up.
big
And
time.
yeah, yeah, and kind of that like self-development and constructive criticism and feedback. I really think it is important to think of feedback as a gift, right? Because
Yeah.
you're receiving input from other people, whether it's objective or not, kind of open to opinion. But there could be nuggets in there that others could use for self development. And yeah, I really like that you're a fan of raising others up, because I think that that's a really important trait. I mean, especially in this day and age, in this climate, and everything that's going on, it's really important to carve out areas of like peace and love and like a hopefulness, right? So
Yeah,
I really appreciate that about you.
of
I think
course.
that's awesome. Yeah.
And I mean, and I'm sure you feel the same way. Like, what goes around comes around. You put that out there in the world, and sometimes, I always tell my girlfriend Rachel, like if you're feeling discouraged, just encourage somebody else. Or sometimes when you feel like, like when I'm feeling like, man, I haven't gotten any auditions. It always happens to me, Bethany. Like I'm like, damn, I have no auditions. Nothing's going. What's happened? It's a dry 3 weeks. And then I'll get my friend that calls me and it's like, hey man, I got a really big audition. I need you to help me with it. And I'm like, "Oh, of course I'll help you." And I go and I help. But you know what? A week later, I'll get a string of auditions. I'll get something. I'll get somebody say, "Hey, you want to offer you a job or something like that?" Will happen, and it's just you. I really believe that you have to constantly keep turning that energy wheel, and that faith wheel and the hope wheel and the love wheel. And if you keep giving that out, you keep getting it back. And it's just great. The world is so much better like that.
Is there anybody else that you admire or look up to, or anybody who has encouraged you over the years that you haven't had a chance to talk about yet that you want to share?
Um, my acting coach. I was trying to think like acting teachers, and I've had a lot of acting teachers in the past that have encouraged me. Um, Coming out here, my acting coach and teacher, she's coming out with a kind of like an anniversary edition of her book, but her name is Ivana Chubbuck, and she's trained a lot of actors out here in Los Angeles and all over, and on their award-winning, she's trained a lot of famous actors. And so I read her book in college. My dad gave it to me, and I was like, oh, cool. It's at the time it was a national bestseller. It was called Power of the Actor. And I was like, great, she's worked with all these people, and I took whatever advice I could get from it. And it's funny how things kind of come back around years and years later. I came to Los Angeles, and I didn't really go into classes, but I had a friend of mine that was involved in her studio, in her class, and I it wasn't even like I auditioned, because I think that she has kind of like a waiting list. There's classes that are under hers, but I was able to perform in front of her, and she invited me into her class. And then she said, hey, you don't have to pay, because if you want to work for me, then you can do a work study program. And I was there for years, and she's kind of like an acting mom to me in some way. And she coached me on Call of Duty, and I got nominated for a BAFTA, and I think it's because of her work. It's not. I mean, people are like, "Yo, you got that." I take this. It's the credit is not even mine. It's I believe it's God's, and in this case, it's also hers. So you know, I mean, yeah. So I think that because she took me in like that, and because at a time that it was like fate. She's somebody who I hold very dearly to my heart, and I think is worth mentioning.
What's something or someone that you admire or that means a lot to you that might surprise people?
Um, Man, that's a great question that might surprise people. I think that people who know me would be surprised to know that I'm not really into sports. Even though I do lift weights, I love working out. There are certain sports that I like, boxing and stuff. I'm not very much into sports. People who know me know that. So if you know that, then for those people, it would be surprising to know that I do still have a lot of sports heroes. Because in the same way that I think that acting for me is very much an athletic art, and not in the way that dance is, but in the way that I believe you have to train like you would if you were, trying to achieve something physically. I think that, for me, when I was working on COD or when I'm working on something that's a prolonged amount of time, for me, I was working on that game for like a year and a half, almost 2 years. So it felt like like, this is the season. Like right now, it's game time, and I'd wake up thinking about that. And I'd wake up the whole week. I would just be like thinking about, my character and the story. And I think that that little obsession was great to have. So, yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but
It does. It does. Yeah.
your questions are so thought provoking. They'll send me off into an amazing tangent, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, are we still talking about the same thing, Bethany?
I like tangents. I
Yeah.
like tangential thinking. Yeah, I tend to do that too. So, absolutely. Yeah, we'll go wherever the tangents take us. So you did touch on this a little bit, but maybe there's if there's anything else that you want to elaborate on. But was there any advice or lessons that you got from somebody that you admire that you would really want to pass on to someone else that you haven't, already touched on or mentioned?
Um, that I haven't touched on. I mean, I definitely want to pass on like my father's, wisdom that he gave me. My mother's, I mean, it's interesting thinking about that because I don't have kids yet, but thinking about the future, into having kids, um, it's essentially, your parents' wisdom and knowledge that they've passed on to you, but then it's filtered with your life and it's filtered. And so much has happened in the 21st century, so much has happened in my lifetime, and I mean, things were chill when I was a kid in the 90s, very, very different, and then after 2000, everything just changed so fast, and it is changing so quickly. So I think that I'm not anybody that I haven't talked about, but I definitely want to keep like my family, values and pass those on, and the wisdom that my dad has taught me about life. And I think that there's certain things that are certain bits of wisdom and knowledge that are timeless, and we should hold on to them, especially now that technology is what it is, um, because who knows what we'll be doing in 15, 20, 30 years, I mean, 30, 40 years ago, us talking like this would be like, oh my, we would be the coolest people in the world. Okay. We would be like CIA spies. It would be something like Russia. It would be some crazy stuff going on. Okay. Now it's just, there ain't nothing to it. So,
Yeah, no, now it's commonplace, right?
yeah.
The technology's come so far.
Yeah.
Um, can you share some of those nuggets of wisdom that your family has passed on to you? Like what have they said to you that you definitely carry with you that's made like a big impact on you?
Yeah, well, I mean, the obvious one, and I think a lot of great parents will tell their kids to do this, is to just follow your dreams, you know? And I'm Cuban American. And a lot of Cuban Americans follow their dreams, but a lot of Cuban Americans also have very, very, traditional conservative parents that may want their kids to stay close. And just in general, a lot of parents want their kids to stay close. If you say, hey, I'm going to move away from Miami and go all the way to the other coast to Los Angeles at 23 years old and, make it as an actor, they're going to say, wait a minute, what? But my parents, they saw that I loved acting from a very early age as a kid. And they said, hey, if you like doing it, then continue to do it. And when I said I want to go to school for it, they never told me not to do it. And so I mean I think that letting your kids do whatever it is that they want to do. If they really believe in themselves, if it's something that, my dad always says, hey, I'm glad you didn't want to be, do rodeos in the Midwest because I would have had to move out to Nebraska or something, and watch you do that. I'm glad you went out to LA. I can, be an actor there and you can, enjoy the sun. But essentially, yeah, he would have gone wherever I would have wanted to go. And if, my son wants to be whatever it is, if he wants to, pilot planes, if he wants to row boats, doesn't matter. If that's their passion, then they should follow it. And, they'll be so happy doing that for the rest of their life.
So it sounds like you have an immense amount of gratitude for what they've instilled um, in you that has kind of like kept you going, and now you've got that same wisdom to pass on to other people, which I think is a really beautiful thing. So
Yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah. And it's just an attitude of gratitude. And, it's also just knowing that, in the case of parenting, I mean, again, I don't have kids, but my advice as a non-parent to a parent is that your kids are always watching. So, you are the example. It's not really what you say, it's what you do that counts. So,
True. Facts. Yep.
mm,
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it too.
yeah.
I don't have kids either. But yeah, I like to think like if I did, I would have wanted them to like kind of pick up on my same, like what I value, did it, instill that in them, and then hopefully that propels them forward, which it sounds like your parents did for you, which is a really awesome thing.
Yeah, and I think that just in general, that I think that that's a good way of living, to be honest, whether you're thinking of kids or future for or not, it's a kind of like a stoic way of living where it's like don't just talk about the miracle, be the miracle. Don't talk about the person that you think the good person needs to be. This is what a good man is. No, 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 just be that man. Become that person. Whatever there is you're just talking about, do it. Be the example. And sometimes setting the example is what other people need to see and latch onto so that they can do that themselves.
Yeah, when you're kind of thinking like, well, this type of person would do this, and like, well, if you want to be that type of person, just do that. Do the
Mhm.
thing. Do the thing, and then you can be the thing. Like essentially, right?
And the reason why I think a lot of people don't is because it's so easy it happens in the little smallest mundane moments by ourselves. So it's very easy to just kind of turn our cheek and be like, yeah, maybe not right now, or let just this moment or whatever. And you just kind of it's human to fall back into your own habits and your own ways of thinking. But if once we start to really, really drive it in and really make a change, it's amazing how much of a change your way of thinking can make. And just a small change has a profound effect on your life.
Do you think that people are born with creativity, or where do you think creativity comes from? Like the root of creativity in an individual?
I think that I do think that everybody's born with some sort of creative bit, in some which way. I mean, not everybody's born to be a musician or an actor or a dancer or whatnot. But I think that all kids, I mean, before you can speak words, kids are already singing la 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 la. They're trying to just make some noise with their mouth, and they're shaking their body in some weird way. They don't know what they're doing. They're moving. And then maybe when they get old enough and they understand the things, then they start to play pretend, and they start to, I want to play house, or I think that, and definitely they draw. So kids are born, all kids do art. We can't help but want to do art. That's it. You want to play with crayons, and you want to play pretend, and you want to dance, and you want to boogie, and all that stuff. So that's, I think important. That's definitely worth noting that early on in our life, when we're so innocent, when our energy is just so full of light, you know, uh, that's what we want to do. That's what's coming out from us is just constant art, and creativity.
When do you feel the most inspired to be creative?
Hmm. Oof. The easy answer is when I get a good job. So if I get a good role and I'm like, wow, I'm going to be doing this for a while, then I'm definitely inspired. But you know, uh, my family inspires me. My family really inspires me, and when I'm given that huge opportunity, all kidding aside, I think about them, and I think about how will this affect them in some way, in any which way. And I moved out in 2010 to Los Angeles, so it wasn't until 2022 that Call of Duty came out. And before that, I had been working on little things here and there, but nothing that put me on like a billboard or anything. So when I was working on the game, knowing that was a potential outcome, it was cool. But what really got me most excited about that was that your family's going to experience that. They're going to see that. They're going to see all the hard work that you've done. And again, going back to my parents, they used to sell concessions at intermission during my middle school plays, so they've been around supporting me for a very long time. So when I do get the job, I'm inspired to act because I can't help it. I just love acting. I've always been doing, before I ever started acting, I was running around acting. But what inspires me the most about that, even more so than anything, is just the thought of them and how much that they've loved and supported me up until now and how much they continue to do it.
What would you say to anybody who is struggling with their creativity? Or maybe they've hit a block, or maybe they're trying to overcome frustration and kind of get back into creating. What advice would you have?
Well, keep at it, keep at whatever they're doing, have faith, lean into their faith. And for me, sometimes it's like writer's block. I get actor's block. So I'm trying to figure out a scene, I'm trying to break it down, or I'm trying to hit hard on something that I can't really wrap my head around. And then eventually I do. And when you do, it's just barely a drop coming in. And then once the drop starts to come, it rains. It's just like a pour of creativity. And I think that all artists will tell you that. Uh, you know, my girlfriend Rachel will, when she's choreographing something, she'll be like, I don't know what I'm gonna do and for this piece. And then after 1 minute, she comes back and she's like, look at what I've done. Like, do you think this is good? And I'm like, yeah, of course, yeah. Because, once you get going, and if you really love it and if you're really looking for it everywhere, then you'll find that creativity because the best place that you can become an artist is from real life. It's from out here. So if you want to be a better musician, a better actor, dancer, whatever, Kobe Bryant, used to say, here's an athletic hero of mine, he used to look at everything in life and say, how can I become a better basketball player as a result of this? That has nothing to do with the court, has nothing to do with the ball. How do I relate this to basketball? You know, and that's pretty amazing.
How do you overcome criticism? And do you have a specific way that you process things like constructive feedback?
Yeah, I mean, I think constructive feedback is great. We're going back to the feedback, which I think is awesome too. Especially when it's amongst colleagues, when it's amongst peers, in the world of film and TV and video games, you have to go back over and over and over and over again. And when we did COD, the way that we did it is not the way that it first when we first did it. The director would say, "Hey, all right, you got to do this, you do this, you change this up, you got to do this, you saying this funny." So then you change it up and you all collaborate, and then it comes into something. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question or if I'm
No.
I hit
Oh,
a
you
hit a
did.
tangent on something.
No, how do you specifically like deal with criticism and processing that and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, I understand that it's a job. Here's the thing: constructive criticism and feedback is one thing. It can help you become better, and you just have to be careful who's giving it to you, because if you're taking it from a critic, sometimes critics don't know what they're really talking about. But if you're taking it from somebody, who is a producer or a casting director in an actor's case, you might want to take that, you know. But even then, some guy's opinion may be different than somebody else's. So one casting director might say, "Hey, I like your take on this," and then he might go to somebody else and she might say, "No, I didn't like it at all." So it's you never know, and you can only just put your best foot forward. And the little bits of criticism that you take throughout your time working, whatever is recurring, then you might want to ask yourself, "Hey, is this something that I might want to change in the future?" And then if that's the case, and so you can always get better. I mean, you're always a student. You're always a student. Always. That's why I coach with Ivana. That's why I don't go to class anymore, but on my next big thing, I'm working with her. So, it's always just be a student, be a white belt, as the like in martial arts.
Nice. I like that. Always be a student.
Hmm.
That's great. 'Cause, yeah, I think sometimes criticism can really, if you let it, it can really kind of deflate you, especially when you feel like, you finally have that momentum and you're finally like getting somewhere, you're getting a foothold into something. And then, um, like I deal with that every day at work, right? It's like I get criticism from every, every corner, right? So
Hmm.
it is really hard to like deal with that. And some of it's useful and some of it's not. And sometimes it's hard to figure out like, okay, is this really actually useful or do I just need to disregard it and just go on to the next thing? And sometimes it's hard to tell the difference.
Super hard to tell the difference. Very,
Yeah.
doing voiceover. I mean, let me tell you, like, there's people telling you, "Hey, we want to do it this way. It's not like that. It's not like this. It's not like that." So you have to be able to say, "Hey," because you think to yourself, "Man, do I suck? Am I just that bad?" Well, no. This is the game. This is what people do. They're changing things up. It's a little bit of maybe the engineer's got to change something. So you have to know to say, "Hey, wait a minute. This is the profession. This is the job." Because all jobs have criticism. All jobs
Hmm.
have some sort of feedback. We all want to get better and better. If everybody was working perfectly at their jobs, there would be no conflict, and that just would be impossible. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it's a delicate balance, I think, to try to find that. Yeah. Find the nuggets and then I try to just use what I can and just disregard the rest if there's something meaningful. Like, okay, I'll take that. You
Yeah.
said you did mention like if you hear like the same thing more than once, right? So if there's like a recurring theme in kind of the feedback that you're getting, right? Then maybe like there's an opportunity there to improve something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's at least worth posing that question. Like, is there something that I could be doing? Because sometimes people don't want to ask that question because it implies that they're doing something wrong. So they're like, I don't want to, I'm doing everything right. Well, maybe not, and that's okay because we're human. Like, there's, get better. It's cool,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And I have total respect for people who are like, no, actually, I think I am doing it wrong. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, it gets, they understand it.
You have a specific process that kind of helps you unlock that momentum or kind of get back to at least where like a comfortable place where you feel like okay, you can actually, maybe do the work to get the momentum back. Is there a specific process that you have?
Yeah. When I work, I mean, that, it's weird. When it comes to work, I'll be inspired from all different sorts of angles. So sometimes it'll hit me from the top, sometimes it's the bottom, and then I never know what's going to get me going that day or what's going to light the fire. But when it comes in general to just getting up and doing the things that I know I need to do, being starting the day with gratitude, anytime that I can be like, hey, anytime that I can bring up gratitude and just have the attitude of gratitude, whether I'm trying to figure something out creatively, whether I'm trying to motivate myself, whether things are going good or bad, it's just always nice to say thank you internally. As almost kind of like a little deep breath, little thank you for what I have, and move forward. And it's crazy how that just, even if it doesn't inspire me or motivate me or give me anything, when I'm blocked, it puts me in a better mood and puts me on a more neutral bit to get to whatever place I need to get to. And it's easier to do that. So attitude of gratitude, I guess.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes mood is everything. It really depends on like because we get input right from multiple quarters daily, and depending on the mood you're in, you're either gonna take it really well or you're not gonna take it well at all. So yeah, kind of starting your whole day from being more centered and yeah, I really try to start my day in a good mood and like super pumped to like take on my day and like if I work out in the morning, I always have a better day. So
and
that's
sometimes
like my
and sometimes you have to put it on. Sometimes you have to, like, it's not easy to do that, but it's
yeah.
still better. It's still, because you know what, it's like the world isn't really what it is. The world is how you see it. So if you see it all bright and colors and happiness and hey, there's opportunity here, well, yeah, people are gonna see that in you, and they're gonna be attracted to you in that way, and they're gonna be like, hey, where are the opportunities around this person? you know yeah, definitely mood is important. And on the days that we really don't want to get up, and we don't want to, those are the days that we really got to put it on the most. And because I like to, like, motivation, I like to say it's like showering. You got to do it daily because it wears off. So you got to do it again every day. I mean, it's not like it's easy. People are just like, yeah, feel better. No, it's not. And the
Yeah.
most successful people who preach about this all the time to hundreds of thousands, they'll tell you, no, it's not easy, but it's definitely worth it. And once you get in the habit of doing it, it gets easier, because then like you said, it kind of like becomes your identity almost.
Is there anything that you wanted to share that maybe we hadn't touched on yet around creativity and kind of carving out a place for yourself, kind of, in the universe and finding your own voice. Um, is there anything that we didn't touch on that you would like to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of carving out like a voice professionally, uh I don't even know. Like, it's amazing the type of things that I get called in for, and that would, how people think of me, and for the types of future roles. And so it's interesting what the like the place that I've been getting into, especially into my 30s. Um
Oh, you're just a baby.
I know, yeah, big time baby, big time baby. Um but um But yeah, definitely, I just it wasn't until I'd say, my early 30s that I was like, how do I become a better person? And I started to think maybe the key to being a better, because so many years, it was all about becoming a better actor and being a successful actor. And I was very hungry to, have the career, and I didn't have it at the time. And I wasn't so much thinking about how to be a better person. I was listening to a lot of motivational tapes on how to become a better person. But I would only hear the stuff, really, I would only retain what I felt was, necessary to get me a job. And it wasn't until I was like, well, no, wait a minute, like, what's my purpose? How do I, fulfill that? And that's when really things started to happen for me career wise. And it's because, and all the stuff that I had been, all those motivational tapes that I listened to over the years, it all kind of just caught up with me. And I was like, well, wait a minute, I can act, but I can help others. That's really what it's all about. And if I can act more, then I can help more. And that's how I've been at. That's usually when I have that attitude, that I act more. So if you have the attitude of gratitude and about helping others have that same attitude, then you will do, it is whatever it is that you feel is going to help you do that. And in my case, it's acting.
Yeah, I have a friend who always says the universe provides. You got to put your energy out there, but the universe provides.
I love
So,
that. I love that.
yeah.
So
Yeah. And I will say, I think there's a certain, I do feel like there's a shift that happens with age. Cause I'm way on the other side of 40.
a baby too. No, you're a baby too, still.
No. And it's like, as I'm thinking about kind of heading into my 50s now, it's like, okay, how am I thinking about life in comparison to how I thought about life in my 20s and 30s, right? And I just feel like there's definitely a shift that happens where we stop thinking about, like, we become less self-centered, and we become more like universe centered. And I do feel like sometimes that does come with age, where it's like, okay, I did all my self-centered stuff, and now it's like, how do I become a better person just in the universe in general, existing with all of these other people that exist in the universe? And like, how can I help, kind of thing. So I do feel like there's something there that comes with age, or even just a less self-centered perspective, which it sounds like that hit you as well.
Big time, it hit me. Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think that's definitely has to be true. Maybe some people may feel it more than others, but definitely, if you do feel it, you should take advantage of it and start to, say, hey, how can I explore ways of living so that I am more, benevolent to my neighbors, to, those people that we're connected with, everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And the universe will provide. So,
The universe, yes, the universe will provide. Yes, exactly.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, she's very, very spiritual, and I call her a lot because I have a lot of, mostly about work, a lot of work frustrations, and when I start, feeling like the lowest, I call her and I just vent, and she's like, "You know what I'm going to say?" I'm like, "I know what you're going to say. You're going to say the universe provides." So, okay, I'm going to put something more positive out there, and the universe will provide something that I deserve from me putting the positive energy out there. So it's tough to remember that, but I think it's important to remember that as well.
Wise words. Spiritual people they're like old souls, so she knows what she's talking about.
She does know what she's talking about. Yeah. Yeah. Did you have any advice on building like a support network? Because like one thing we didn't really talk about, we touched on it a little bit, but just about like the people that you gather around you kind of on your journey as you're kind of going through life, and that group of people will change, right, as your own, wants and needs and desires change. But do you have any advice for people who are trying to, build their own network of support or their own community around them?
Yeah, I mean, they say like you're the five, like the sum of five people who you hang around with. So you definitely want people who believe in you, as much as you believe in you. And you also, again, it goes back to helping others. If I believe, at least in my experience, when I have helped out as many people as I can, and when I'm just in the mood to help all the time, people will help you. So people who wouldn't want to work with somebody who loves life and is grateful to just be in the room and doing their thing and is going to give everything that they can. So you'll find that if you whatever it is that your endeavor is, if you're following it and you love doing it, and if that love takes you to help others along the way, those people may or may not help you, but you will find that, again, going back to that energy that you put out, the universe will provide and you will get that help that you need. You'll get that support. But, it can be toughest when you have close friends that maybe you've had for a long time that are a good friend, but they just aren't, they aren't helping you in some way, and that's a tale as old as time, because we all have friends like that, unfortunately. And you hear about that sometimes, and don't let them hold you back. Don't let your family hold you back if that's the case. So sometimes, your team of your support group may not be the people who love you the most. I mean, it may be your parents that maybe they don't want you to travel and do follow your dreams, but they love you so much they want you to stay. Well, yeah, that's maybe they're not right, and maybe they do love you, but then you ought to think to yourself, hey, are these the type of people that I want to have in that close circle?
Is there a specific cause or specific charity that you would like to signal boost?
Yeah, there's three charities that I donate to, so might as well do it. There's ASPCA, for the animals. There is St. Jude's Hospital, and there is the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles.
Do you have any experiences that you'd like to share with any of those charities?
I don't know. I mean, I've always been an animal lover, so I mean, of course, I'm going to donate to the ASPCA. I've saved animals before, walking around the street, and on several occasions in my life where I've had to save a stray animal. So I definitely think that anybody who needs help, any little pets, anything we can, but also um, these families that are with St. Jude, they get taken care of big time when they're there, and they don't have to pay a penny of that. And a lot of people donate to St. Jude, and that's just such a beautiful thing, and it's amazing. So I think that that's really, really great. And um, definitely, I mean, if you have a penny or a dollar or anything, donate to them, because these people, you're changing lives big time in doing that.
Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciated your time today. I hope that you also found it valuable and worthwhile. So thank you so much.
Very much so. I always enjoy whatever, podcast interviews that people ask me to do, but this is one of the ones I enjoyed the most. I really, really loved your questions. Yeah, I just had we thought we had a great conversation. I loved your input. And, I'm just glad that you gave me the forum to be able to speak about these things. Cause like you said, a lot of the time they'll ask a lot of questions about COD, and I like answering that, but I love answering this. This is why I want to act. And this is where I think, I want to be remembered for, is for, the input and the difference that I make in others. So thank you for letting me share that, Bethany. Be a siren here. It's like Gotham City out there. Sometimes we live on a main street, so sometimes it's crazy.
No,